This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Steve Ardire. I'm an advisor to AI startups. My byline is Merchant of Light, and we're on Popping the Bubble.
Hey, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us here on Popping the Bubble. It's a pleasure to have you. We actually met through Twitter, funny enough, and have now become friends in real life, IRL. And it's been such an honor to work with you and see what you're up to. You are the AI guru. And before we get into that, we've just been at this awesome show called AI Show Business and learning all about the intersection between AI and entertainment here in Los Angeles. But before we get into that, I definitely want to talk about the show. I would love to find out more about your story, your journey. How did you become this AI guru? Tell us about that.
Right. So I've been an advisor to software startups for over 20 years. I think the last tally is something like 50 plus startups in many different spaces. So fast forward to the recent past, which is like the last 4 years, I saw the AI wave, a tsunami wave actually coming. And I positioned myself squarely to ride that wave. And since that time, I think, we're seeing AI become the hottest thing. It's sizzling red hot. Everybody wants to get into it. And I mean, if you look at the business plans of most startups, you take X and you add AI to it, and that's the go-to-market. So it's been the 4 year ago positioning has really paid off in spades because I'm currently advising 7 AI startups in different spaces.
Wow, that's amazing. 7 startups you're advising. I don't know how you do it. But let's talk a little bit about AI, because one of the things that I noticed about the conference is that there seems to be a lot of different meanings to what exactly AI is. And even AI is composed of general AI, and then there's machine learning, and there's just so much there to unpack. So I'd just love to hear from you, the expert. Tell us a little bit about, what exactly is meant by AI.
So AI is a broad term. So the term's been around for 40 plus years, and it's gone through, many incarnations. In fact, the way to qualify it that colleagues and myself actually are doing as well is calling it modern AI. Modern AI now uses some of the more sophisticated techniques in terms of the machine learning algorithms, especially deep learning, which is the hot bucket there. And it's a matter of applying it to data or images or video and allowing the algorithm to suss out the who, the what, the how, and ultimately the why, which is the hardest thing to do. So as enterprises and consumers, we're seeing it, applied to the consumer space. In fact, in your smartphone, you've got embedded AI capabilities in there. You've got AI in the cloud. The next space, AI in enterprises. The next space is AI in the network, for things like ambient intelligence. So the bottom line is, as AI is adopted, it will, more and more, you'll see machines emerging as the top collaborators, which is a very interesting angle. So there's interesting statistics back to the enterprise side, where I saw this HBR article, Harvard Business Review article, to where something like 33% of the most value-added contributions come from only 3 to 5% of the employees. So that begs the question, what the hell are the other people doing?
Yeah. Okay. So basically the machine, are you saying machines can do better than humans?
Actually, they can. When you look at image analysis, for instance, when you're looking at speech recognition, you're getting 98, 99% accuracies. So in secular areas for a particular purpose, that's a well-defined purpose, machines are becoming, computer vision is another one. They're starting to surpass humans. Now, where humans still excel is the multimodality, the machine learning and I use machine intelligence, which is AI plus machine learning. In that instance, the multimodality is a tough area, but it's now being addressed, quite smartly in terms of things like how do you do things like in our conference, that we just went to AI Showbiz, how AI can anticipate human behavior. So when you stand up a neural network and it could predict interaction 43% of the time, these are early instantiations versus humans that do it 71% of the time. The bottom line is that you can use your AI to do things like read body language, okay, and which has some interesting implications there. But you can also do it for more productive purposes like malicious intent. You can kind of use that as early warning system or heads up to malicious intent.
Right. Well, I think that the thought of AI is scary to a lot of people. And, especially with, what you just said in terms of machines are better at a lot of things than humans are. So, but let's talk about a little bit about, what augmented intelligence or artificial intelligence can do to actually help the human condition and the human experience. That was something that was talked about a lot in the conference, which I loved. So, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So yesterday was the inaugural conference of a boutique conference called AI Showbiz, which was all about the intersection of AI and entertainment. The interesting thing about it, the producer Molly Lavick, by the way, did a phenomenal job, and she attracted some of the luminaries, in the space, people that were pioneers in augmented reality, virtual reality, producers of brand name movies. This eclectic group of people were not only just super creative, but they were some of the most well-grounded people. In fact, I tweeted just today that it makes most AI conferences look boring by comparison.
It's very true.
So we hear about, because of the major players like IBM Watson and many, many others. I mean, Watson just now formally did their show called World of Watson just last November. So and this is a huge show. This is in Las Vegas. This is one of their two big shows. It'll probably be their biggest show. And there was over 20,000 people there. And they've really set, through a very sizable marketing budget, the tone on using AI. Their number one target is healthcare, financial services, but you can go into, marketing, sales automation, human resources. The other things are things like XAI to schedule meetings. So really where there is it really nets out to this. You can go on and on. Where there's procedural routine task to be done, why the hell not automate it? Because the amount of time humans spent on collecting, aggregating, doing menial tasks is wasted time that you could be applying to, analyzing and figuring out for faster time to insights to drive positive outcome.
Right. Yeah, definitely a lot there to think about. And I think, one of the things that for me was very impressive about the conference was just the amazing creativity and also the machine learning or the AI. When you unleash it on a creative task, it doesn't necessarily come back with a human-like product. And we saw a film, we saw a song, we saw some poetry. But what I liked about it was that it really could be inspirational in terms of the creation process.
I want to emphasize that point. It could, you nailed it. It right. Could be inspirational. And it's really having thinking out of the box, so to speak. So in other words, creative talent to think out of the box is only based on knowing what the hell is in the box. But the AI can kind of give it another type of reveal that may, because of the combinatorial effects of what it's doing when AI, especially unsupervised learning. So I should backtrack. Most of the AI today is supervised learning, where you have to train the algorithm to do things like fraud detection, or in medical fields, radiology, mammogram, stuff like that, which has tremendous accuracy. All of this, by the way, is in support of humans. So if you can, look at a problem at a higher threshold where you've connected most of the mission critical important dots, that allows you to illuminate the dots, which is really the expertise of humans in terms of how they're doing, the contextual associations, which is still being worked on with, next generation. So some of the cool areas right now are using transfer learning, which is now where you learn a certain domain, like in, finance, and you can apply those resolution of problem sets to another domain like enterprise resource planning. Now, the beauty of this, the smaller training sets that you can stand up and then take that and apply it to another domain is incredible efficiency for machines. And I mean, that is really what it's about, is that the guru Peter Drucker, who was, in fact, his grandson, presented at the conference yesterday. After his presentation, I asked him, I think you would agree, according to Peter Drucker's thinking, efficiency should be delegated in machines, while humans should be concentrating on effectiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. Humans are still much better at putting things into a contextual light. So we can take what the machines automate and then just improve processes, altogether and in so many ways.
That's why the net of augmented intelligence rather than AI is like, yesterday's AI. Right now, it's really, again, just to emphasize, because it's a very important point, it's all about humans and machines working together, to drive faster insights and more positive outcomes. The other thing, one of my favorite areas, where I really see, especially in the creative genre, like the AI showbiz that we just attended, which was phenomenal, as we already said, is for, you look at how do startups compete against the big status quo players who over the past year have totally opened up the throttle on open sourcing their engines, which gives them a huge advantage. So in addition to collecting the data like Facebook and Google do, everybody, I'm guilty of it as well, some people more so, give their data away for free. So when you're giving your data away for free to Google and Facebook, they have a tremendous advantage in knowing more about you. So it isn't just the algorithms today that is for an AI company, it's how you interleave the right meaningful data with the algorithms and then have a compelling enough application for whatever target, whether it be Joe and Jane knowledge worker or specialist. But the bottom line is startups have to be cognizant, unless they have a vertical specific, where they really have nailed this and they have great data aggregation, with the superior algorithm versus TensorFlow, Torch, the Microsoft tools, etc. You're going to have trouble, because the thing about AI startups, most of them are geeky and they can't really market in a way that sell their way out of a wet paper bag. They're that bad. That's why you see so many acqui-hires, not acquisitions per se, some of those too. But, most of these startups are not putting up significant enough, revenue numbers. It's hard for them to get to 5 to 10 million a year. So if you look at it, Google set this tone 3 years ago when they acquired DeepMind for $550 million. It really was a shot across the world. And since that time, all the other big cats and players have emulated that. We don't need to discuss who. It's everybody's been doing that. So I wrote a post last year on this was like last spring, machine intelligence is a red hot space, but the bar is being raised higher for startups. So after what I just said, one of the areas that I really think is a key one is beyond applications and we saw manifestations at AI Showbiz, is that AI ultimately becomes the UI. So when you're designing, it's all about, like in media, right? What we saw yesterday, Sandra, was, hey, rather than just doing storytelling, even though it's great storytelling in a linear medium, they want to create an interactive experience that brings the people into the experience, that has a degree of serendipity, that really is sort of like, wow, it just hits upon all the right emotional triggers that we have as humans, and it makes it so experiential, whether it's a new genre like we saw with I Am Eve and her music, production, which was phenomenal, or I think the hot area is mixed reality, where you're taking elements of augmented with virtual. And because virtual reality, unfortunately, it always comes down to porn and sex, and that only goes so far, right? Japan just opened up a VR porn shop, and I think you can go in there, and it's a great pricing, by the way. It's something like $6 an hour, but if you want to stay all day, it's only like $24.
Oh my God. Okay, so there was a lot that you just said there, and I think that it's important to kind of take a step back and let's talk a little bit more. So startups, as you were talking about, the startups in AI have a major challenge because you've got the big guys, you've got Google and Microsoft and Facebook way, way, way ahead of them in terms of the data collection and then the application of AI on top of that data. But you talked about their strategy now is open sourcing their AI or their data. So how can that be an advantage to startups?
Okay. So the bottom line is that every AI out there provides some degree of who, what, where, when, and how, but not why. Why is like one of the key open areas where if you can deliver causal reasoning, which is the why of AI, you've got a very interesting play. So this kind of bumps you up over what I call the plumbing and the weeds in terms of, the data wrangling, the data lakes, which is all boring stuff for the most part. It's necessary, but it's really boring stuff. So in fact, one of my startups that I'm advising, which is called Melo, MEELO.com, this is the play there. It's applying causal reasoning with context and time. So data-driven businesses, which is increasing with intensity, you need methods to better automate knowledge transfer with speed and accuracy. And Melo, which also includes, the who, which includes why, the causal analysis, it allows you to do reasoning, which humans do fluidly, right? When you talk and you switch contexts, assuming you're not talking to a dumbass, people track with you. I said, they'll even say, you mean in what context? How many times, Sandra, have you said that? I mean,
all the time.
All the time, right? It's pervasive out there. Everybody does it. So if you can have a causal reasoning engine that fluidly learns over time, that surfaces, hidden, patterns that you may not, grasp, and beyond just the standard of, sentiment analysis, which is in many cases overrated. But if you can actually understand things like perception and intent, wow, that's, that could be applied to things like next generation customer intelligence, brand intelligence. I mean, that's the holy grail out there. Understanding the behavior and intent of people for buying stuff, for influencing them, right? I mean, we saw, still to this day, right? Minority Report, when Tom Cruise, that got his eyeballs replaced, when he went through the shopping area and they were pitching him, they thought he was a different person. But you saw how through tracking you and knowing you, your behaviors, your intent, your history, you can really get granular and you can influence things a whole lot better.
Right. This is like serving up what you need before you know you need it. Right?
Bingo. Well said. That's spot on.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And then, so another thing that you mentioned just briefly was the unsupervised learning. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So unsupervised learning is where the AI learns on its own accord. Okay. So you don't need the training sets. In other words, it has the ability to put together, connecting the right dots, with initial guidance, of course, but then it has the ability to, with, interaction with you, to learn and become smarter. And then the AI actually starts to drive itself. And really, that's really the holy grail, what's going on right now, because it incorporates things like transitive reasoning, right? Transitive reasoning is super cool. Because that's what humans do exceedingly well. They can, use all facets of the brain, everything from, long-term memory, short-term memory, the limbic system, which is your emotional, along with your logic reasoning, right? And the interconnections, all of this, that's why all the research into understanding the brain is just so happening right now. And there's so much action going on there in terms of determining the neural pathways, the axon, the axonal activity, et cetera. I mean, as a lifelong learner, I'm just fascinated by this. I'm spending as much of my time on it. But the reasoning by transivity really means this. Have we seen this before? What did we do? Did it work? Was I happy about it? What were the consequences about it? That's the holy grail.
this is the way that the computers are getting programmed so that they understand and can reason in a human-like way. So even almost getting towards the whole sentient and feeling and emotional aspects of human characteristics.
Spot on. I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly right. The notion of, so the categories is, most of the stuff we see out there is, as a recap, is narrow AI. So it's applied to a certain problem set in healthcare, finance, task-based stuff. Then the next bump up from that, which is working right now. In fact, one of the presenters at the conference is taking a project called, it's from Novamente. The engine is called OpenCog, but they're taking out a piece of that, and we don't want to, spoil, because they're actually going to be doing a presentation at the Smart Data Conference in Redwood City on January 30th through February 1. And that's exciting. So they're talking about the concept of hypergraph. So let me explain that. What is the engine, behind the scenes, and is really not just a big, Uber graph. And it's not the Uber that we all know. Uber graph means, a big honkin', graph structure of how you interrelate the entities, people, places, things, events, along with the concepts and relationships. That's really the glueware that you need, that the AI is looking to, to aggregate. But the graph structure is all about, how do you interleave the knowledge graph, like the Google knowledge graph, and that's what companies are doing today, because they want, the new Google knowledge graph is great for the web, but you have all these other data sources in your enterprises, all these disparate silos. How do you coalesce that into some kind of formative framework? And that's where you're talking about taking the knowledge graph, but then you have these other graphs like the social graph, right? Where probably the biggest one is Facebook. Then you have things like the interest graph, which essentially what Twitter is, right? Then you can go even more granular in terms of intent graph, behavior graph. It goes on and on and on. So depending on who you are, if you're a consumer facing company, of course, the intent, the behavior, those are the cherries that you really want to nail, because this is where you can, provide custom offers and sell them stuff so they can buy from you. If you're in an enterprise, then you really want to transform the boring systems of record, things with MDM systems with single version of the truth. That works great for structured data, but last time I checked, 90% of the data being pumped out today is unstructured, and unstructured needs AI.
Yes. So making sense of all of that data and then, applying the AI framework to it. But I think one of the things that's most fascinating that's coming out of AI is the whole mimicking of the brain and the neural network, which we touched on just a little bit. But that's, I think, really the cutting edge of where AI is going, and also making computers more, human-like. This is really getting us to the point where humans, and that was something that we talked about also at the conference, where humans can't tell the difference. And that's been happening for a while in terms of some of the experiments, even with the older chatbots, some of the original chatbots, such as Barry, which was the schizophrenic that fooled humans into thinking that it was a real person. But let's talk a little bit about, how this neural networks and the mapping of AI to the brain, how that works.
That's great. It's a great question. And we know the plethora of activity in chatbots today. Now, most of them are just doing, easy tasks, like whether you're doing travel, you want to buy stuff, customer support, etc. So all the big players out there, Siri, Google Now, with the Google Assistant, Microsoft Cortana, they want to make their bots, not socially awkward. So, after a certain period of time, if you try to go outside the domain that it knows and understands, it's going to look really awkward. It's not going to be very effective. So to your point, Sandra, is, how do you apply human-like, and that's the key word or phrase, human-like tendencies, not just in the reasoning end of it. And there's a lot of, methods, Watson and many others that are doing this, but how do you really bring in the emotional intelligence? And what we saw yesterday was a clip from the Laboratory for Animate Technologies called Baby X. So Baby X is probably the leading manifestation of exactly this, because, not only is it a lifelike digital avatar that looks just like a digital human, I mean, it's that level of detail, but what's driving it And this is the difference with other, players that are trying to create photorealism lifelike is one thing, but what's really driving that, which is the neural network. So what the laboratory created, and by the way, there's a commercial spinoff called Soul Machines that was spun out of the lab to productize this. It has funding, a closed funding from Horizon Ventures. There's a press release in December. And the mandate there is to take what it's really good at, which is emotional intelligence, and combine it with logic, cognitive reasoning. You fuse that together, then you have human-like capabilities embodied in a chatbot or embodied cognition. And actually, to that point, there's a new stand-up of a project from IBM, and there's others, but it's easier to talk to them since they spend a lot of dollars in marketing. So it's called Project Into, and the whole point of it is not, for chatbots, is to try to, have them be more human-like you're talking to a kick-ass customer service person, right? Or something like this for the individual and user is create her with a face. So you're really taking it to where, but we're not talking about the cutesy thing. There's a lot of cutesy stuff out there. In fact, there's this Japanese company that puts this little avatar in a little fairy. And when, then it lights
I think
up.
that's actually kind of sad.
It is sad. Let's not even go there. Let's just move it's just like, what kind of life do you really have?
Right. Yeah, no, I think all of that is so exciting. And I think the idea of AI being able to augment my life, and we talked about this a little bit. My dream would be to have my little personal AI coach with me all the time, telling me to drink more water, pushing me harder in my workouts, telling me it's time to meditate or, maybe time to go to sleep, all of these things. And I think that's the upside of having all of this artificial intelligence around us.
But the difference, I agree with that, with one clarification. Mm-hmm. This is where the AI can anticipate your needs rather than just being kind of a pain in the ass. Oh, you got to do this. And that's the problem, with, Fitbits and so forth like that. People get, lazier. They're saying, let me take this thing off. I'm getting annoyed. The thing about it is the annoyance factor. I'd rather have something that is anticipatory, right? Where, based on what I see here, the pattern matching the signals, this is what you need to do. And I'd be much more receptive than having somebody like a personal trainer just, yapping at me, go harder. I already know that.
Okay. Well, I do get motivated from that kind of push. So let's switch gears for a little bit and just dive into the conference, because we talked a little bit about the whole immersive experiences of what's coming with VR and artificial intelligence. So what was your favorite technology that you saw that does that kind of thing?
So there were a number of them that if you combine them, that would just be like the ultimate in terms of where this is going, right? I really think the whole notion from, a transformation of Hollywood, and these were some of the leading lights, because actually there was a couple of really good vignettes in terms of, and I knew some of this, but the way it was expressed from people like Brett Leonard, who's a pioneer. He did Lawnmower Man, which was this data-driven avatar. If you haven't seen this before, I think it was the late 90s. But he's one of and there were many other people. You can go to the AI Showbiz web. You can see the list of speakers there. But at any rate, I really what the takeaway from them, and all these wonderful presentations was that we need to drive more interactive, compelling experience for people. So rather than just lean back entertainment where you're just, absorbing it, this is like you're getting proactive where you can actually lean in and go as deep or as wide or as hard as you want. That's what I really see. And, whether it goes to like events, there was like this, virtual dome that they were talking about new forms of digital experiences it isn't, it's really kind of pre-made. It's not sensory overload, but it's sort of like you go in there and as sensory creatures, right? You've got all these, inputs coming in and it's triggering your brain into like hyper mode. Like I'm ready to go on warp 5, Scotty.
Right. Yeah. The dome, that was really cool because he was talking about how he could manufacture different kinds of experiences and feelings. and even to the point of making you feel like you're on drugs.
Exactly. So one of the guys said, rather than eating the mushrooms, although they're not that bad, this is what it does. It really, it's the endorphins and other, triggers that are the result of this new type of sensory experience that really kind of takes you right to that, rather than doing, drug induced, it takes you to a more natural way of experiencing things that, could be pleasurable, just a lot of fun, interesting, new ways to, to interact with people. So there's a lot of facets to it.
Right. Yeah. I think that goes back to also one of the early speakers that was talking about the balance of between newness for humans and something that we're already familiar with, and how that creates this new sensory experience for us that can create elation or surprise. And that's really what I think a lot of these companies are targeting doing.
That's well said. That it's really a nice extract of where this is heading is to make this notion of, rather than just the same old stuff with maybe a different, veneer, is that you're really creating new forms of experience. And as, people today get bored faster and easier and have attention deficit disorder, this really allows, for whatever purpose, you're doing it. I mean, it could be, this was AI and entertainment, but in many respects, if you can really, where AI becomes the UI in, what we were talking about earlier in the business world, it makes work more interesting. We know how the disenchantment out there today, people are like, oh, I'm bored. There's so much wasted productivity because they're not engaged. So this really has, maybe this fusion of AI and entertainment could show the enterprises the way to how to really, increase, every CEO out there at Global 2000 companies talking about what's your most precious asset, our workforce. But then they don't put the systems in place to be able to harness that. Like my other statistic, right? Once again, only 3 to 5% of employees at these Global 2000 companies, 3 to 5% are providing 33% of the evaluated collaboration. That is horrible.
Right. Yeah. And why is that? Because there's a lack of engagement there. And I think to your point, what these new experiences are delivering is even more of a connection with the human experience, enabling people to connect with each other in a virtual environment, in a more real-like virtual environment, or experiencing these new types of experiences that take them to different places. But yeah, I think that was sort of one of the themes that I got. And one of the things that these luminaries are really trying to do is create more connection. More
connections. It's interesting. You talk about, some of the, the collaboration tools and, even like in LinkedIn. I mean, of course I use LinkedIn because everybody uses LinkedIn, but how can you really leverage that? It's, you really got to work hard at it on your own volition. But what it really serves up is, sometimes it's right, but there's this whole point, what we're talking about is really coming to empowering the individual. It's really empowerment where you can actually better foster the connections to other people, ones that are outside, like it's so compartmentalized. Some companies have their act together more, but the whole notion is really, how do you build and leverage that relationship capital, but how do you also compress the layers of management? Do companies today really need, 8 or 9 layers of management? It really begs the question, as if you empower individuals, and they don't need to be, having the title, these sometimes, misnomer titles on, senior VP of administration. For what? What do they actually do, rather than try to, herd cats and they get disenchanted? So the whole point is really empower, which is why I love what I do. What I do is, in my startup gigs, I work with the CEO and the executive team to crystallize and make a compelling enough business strategy, put together the pitch, get the pitch funded, and then go to market hard and really show that this differentiated solution is addressing a hard to solve problem and need. And that's that's how startups can win versus the, tie back to what we were talking about earlier as far as, the established status quo. Just acquiring and rolling up companies like it's been going on for decades, and now most recent AI is not the answer. In fact, like Salesforce, let me pick on them, not maliciously, but through good word on a top-notch guy that attended Dreamforce last September, his comeback was the marketing is 18 months ahead of the deliverables for Einstein. There you have. That's one great example.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, sometimes it takes a while to deliver on technology. Are you saying that these big enterprises, is it the management, all of these management layers that are slowing them down?
Yes, it is. And it isn't there where it comes back to, of course, I favor my bias, but it's really an objective bias is on the startups that have, the right product market fit. They've got, the right smart tactical execution to be able to go to market and address unmet needs. I mean, it's always a mixed bag out there, right? I mean, as impressive as Watson is, I've heard many, stories to where it's not addressing, things like customer intelligence, brand experience. For a startup to succeed, you need to leverage as much open source as possible. And there's a lot out there. You need to not just be dependent on one vendor like IBM Watson. You need to interleave other elements that have things like intent-based NLP and,
Wait, what's NLP?
Okay, sorry. So NLP is natural language processing, which actually, takes text and makes it understandable in terms of what are the, the associations and, the constructs of it. But intent-based, comes back to, being able to understand what the interest and the key triggers are. So if you have that baked in to your offering, you have a better chance of doing things, the hardest bucket, right? I said earlier, all A does, what, why, where, when, how, but why. It's coming back to why being the differential. So if you can do all the other stuff plus why, and you can do it context and time, if you have really hard, where you have a high degree of data heterogeneity from the web, the deep web, streaming sources, multiple enterprise sources, the tools out there today, would they work if yes, they could, maybe, but it would be way more cost effective to have an engine that can do this a lot less expensively and probably give you an output to where workers, and that's the other thing about the UI. We haven't picked on these guys. The ones that just throw out all these widgets and dashboards, it makes your head explode. How valuable most of the stuff is totally invaluable. I mean, it's like, what value am I getting from, overload in terms of dashboards and widgets and stuff like that? What it really comes down to, what is really most meaningful that allows me, Joe or Jane knowledge worker, to have faster time to insights? How can I connect the dots faster? That's where AI really comes in. But more importantly, how do you elucidate that? How does it, how do you clarify it? To what purpose? And this is where the humans, right? This is the effectiveness, right? So if the efficiency is machines, the Peter Drucker illusion, right? Or quote, how do you really get those faster time to insights to drive positive incomes and, to more productive results?
Right. Yes. So yeah, again, the AI, the augmented intelligence, working with humans to deliver better results and make their jobs easier. And then that's going to lead to more empowered workers that will be more engaged with the company. And ultimately, just great experience for everyone.
And that's, you got the summary. That's really what it's about.
Right. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't addressed?
Also to say that this was a fun, engaging, empowering session and really enjoyable.
Wonderful. And I learned so much, as I always do, talking to you. So I'm going to enjoy going back to this podcast and listening to it again. So thank you so much for joining me and us on Popping the Bubble.
My pleasure, Sandra. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve.